Now, when we saw that, and as you know, as a Real Wealth member, hopefully you've been joining us on our webinars, we wanted to really find out what was happening in our space, which is mainly 1 to 4 units, but mainly single family. And so we've been interviewing all of the property managers that we work with to see how the properties are performing that we recommend. And if you're new to Real Wealth, let me be super clear about what that is. It's in the extreme affordability range. And when I say affordable, I don't necessarily mean low income. I just mean affordable for the area. So one way to, describe that is that the average income of the area is 3 times the average rent. So if the average income of an area is $2,000 a month, then the average rent should be around 700 or something, or you get what I'm saying. So salary should only be about 3 times rent. And or home prices. Home prices should be only about 3 times salaries. And that is what we consider affordable. So if we can stay within that range, then you have the largest group of people that can afford what you have. If you stay in the median affordability of whatever area you're in, that means that most people in that area can afford your rent or the property that maybe you're trying to sell. So we made it very clear with any teams that we refer our members to that they stay within that they and even slightly below it, slightly below what would be considered affordable. That way, if there would ever be a downturn, there would be more people that could afford that price range. So when we did our webinar with our Indianapolis property management company, I was just shocked to hear the good news that by April 13th, they had already had 86% paid. And only 31 out of 751 of their tenants, of their properties that they manage, only 31 tenants came to them and said that they were experiencing hardship. So I thought that was incredible. And that was by the 13th, which is fairly normal. They say that every month there's reasons why people are late. And but that by towards the end of the month they pay. So I just like, why? And it turns out there's a lot of industries in Indianapolis that are doing great right now. And it turns out Indianapolis is big on biomedical industry, specifically Eli Lilly, that has been very involved in testing and finding the cure to this disease. So, our property manager out there said they've had more applications than ever of more qualified leads for applicants for their rentals than they've ever seen in just 1 week of people with good jobs that are looking for a home. So I don't know if they moved into the area or just got a job change, or maybe they just needed a bigger house or they want a yard. But that's what we're experiencing specifically because what we were looking for to begin with, which is, again, staying in the affordable range. And the reason we did that is everything I explained at the beginning of this webinar, which is I already thought something might hit us. I didn't know what, but I thought something might blow the air out of the bubble that we're seeing in other markets. But if we can just stay in the affordable range, there's always going to be people who need a place to live and they want an affordable place to live that's nice, and ideally in a nice neighborhood that's got a good yard that's been renovated. There'll always be a demand for that. And then I don't know if you got to join us on the Jacksonville webinar, but you can look at all of our webinars with property managers on our website. Just log in and go to the property page and you'll see it there. But again, I was really shocked to see how our Jacksonville team is doing. And they manage not just in Jacksonville, they're also in Ocala and Palm Coast, I believe it is. So same thing, they had 86% paid by April 13th, and they said that's normal, and they expect 95% by the end of the month. And same thing, they're getting great applicants. Again, same question, why? And one of the reasons is this port expansion, and they are a hub for transport and warehousing, and CSX is there, so lots of jobs, and you've got the military. Now, we didn't just by chance end up choosing Jacksonville as a place that we wanted to invest. We knew that these things were there. And when you've got a $238 million deal for a port expansion, that's not something that's just going to disappear in a recession. They've thought this through. If you're going to put $238 million into something, you're probably planning on a recession happening and just planning for that. So here we are. They're finding people in Jacksonville that still need a place to live, especially again at the price point that we're talking about. And again, if you're new to Real Wealth, let me be super clear. That would be between $100,000 and $200,000 homes. It's going to be closer to $200,000 if it's brand new, but we're still finding brand new homes that are less than that, even in the $150,000 range, which is amazing. I don't even know how you can build a home for that price, but they are out there. So on a renovated home, you might be closer to the $120,000 range. And again, more people can afford that. And think about what your mortgage would be on that. I mean, with taxes and insurance, I don't know, $600 or something. So more people can afford that. If you're going to choose what you're going to pay when times get tough, it's probably going to be $600 for your mortgage, to be able to have a place to stay at times like this. So how we learned how to pick cities and how to pick the right asset in those cities happened in 2005. I know you've probably heard the story, but I'll just tell it again because I think it's really important, especially now. That back in 2005, I was just trying to make sense of the craziness back then because I was a mortgage broker at the time and it just didn't make sense, the kinds of loans I was able to give to people. I just would come home scratching my head saying, why is this possible that I can give anyone a loan without any backup at all that they can pay it back? So I had Robert Kiyosaki on the show at the time, and he said, yeah, it's really not going to end well, and it's shocking that people can't see that. So he saw it coming and did exactly what we're doing today. He said, I'm selling all properties in the asset in the bubble markets, which would be California, Arizona, Nevada, Florida at the time was in a big bubble. He said, I'm selling all that. Mainly his holdings were in California, and he was buying in Texas. And this is why. I know you've seen this slide, but because he was able to cash in at the peak, California home prices were up here and property prices, but Texas was just boring and flat. Nothing happening. People just were not attracted to Texas real estate at that time because it was boring. Whereas you could have made all this money in other markets. But if you bought anywhere else, this is the US, California was like up here. So if you bought in California and you made money up here, you could sell it and exchange tax deferred for properties in Texas that hadn't boomed yet. But why would you do that? Well, for safety, because not everything stays the same. And that's the biggest mistake that investors make. They think things will just keep going the same way forever, but physics won't allow that. Prices can't go up forever. It's just a fact. Rents can't go up forever. And when you get to an affordability limit, that's when things change. Now, again, we didn't expect it to be from a virus, but it's what it is. So again, you have this chance to sell at the top and buy in a boring market. But the reason why Kiyosaki was buying in Texas and the reason we followed him and bought this, like 10 of these, was that there was so much job growth, so much population growth. The demographics were moving there. And yet there was massive affordability, massive affordability. We bought these houses, like literally 10 of them, for $140,000, and they rented for about $1,500 a month. So it just made sense. It was a great safe haven to get through the real estate storm that was coming, and rents did not, go down during that time. So here is a slide showing that. Let's see if Dallas is on here. So Dallas rents declined by 0.7%, but not where we were buying, not that house that you just saw. So if you bought the right asset, you saw rents go up. And in our case, we liked the new homes. We liked, A-class neighborhoods, B-class good schools. Now, it was hard to find A-class properties that cash flowed over the last 10 years, but back then we could do it. So our properties didn't go down in value. But look at this. Cincinnati rents went up. Denver, Miami, Chicago, Indianapolis, Salt Lake City, Houston. Atlanta went down a bit, but Atlanta was really in a bubble in the last Great Recession. It kind of crashed hard. There was a lot of mortgage fraud in Atlanta. I don't think that's going to be the case in Atlanta this time, that we would see rents go down. I mean, time will tell. But you know, a lot of these markets have changed since then. Tampa is not what it was. Tampa is not what it was 10 years ago. That area has completely redefined itself. And Nashville has as well. Dallas is not the same. Orlando's not the same. Jacksonville. I mean, all of these cities have really redefined who they are and reinvested in themselves. So, you know, it could be that we don't see any rent declines. We just don't know at this point. And I'm talking about single family rents, single family. It's a little bit different. So I follow, again, Myers Research. This is a company that does research for home builders. And as you know, we do a lot of home building at RealWealth as well. And builders pay these guys a lot of money for this kind of data, but they've been doing free webinars lately. And this is one that they came out with. This was kind of the 3 ways that this recession could unfold. And they had like 500 researchers and economists coming up with this data. So I borrowed it from them and I'm sharing it with you, and I'm giving them credit so that you know where this information came from. There are several ways this could play out, and many are saying, you know, it could be a V-shaped recovery. If you listen to my Harry Dent interview on the RealWealth show that has like, I don't know, 25,000 views now on YouTube, this is what he thought would happen, that there would be a V recovery. But then later there would be issues because of all this money creation. So many people, again, think the longer this goes, the less likely it will become a V. So the way that it would be a V recovery, which means a quick bounce back within 8 to 10 months, would be that the checks get out to Americans right away, so that those who lost their jobs are going to be okay. And then when things get back to normal, they can just go back to work. And then are able to pay their bills on time, supported by the stimulus and unemployment. So if unemployment can, you know, roll out, which is very challenging with millions and millions of people filing, very, very difficult. I'm sure the government wasn't prepared for that at all and are doing the best they can. But if they can roll that out, that will help minimize the damage and therefore help contribute to a quick rebound. And then more people stay on payroll than off, that would allow for the quicker rebound. So that would be if the PPP loans work out, where small businesses can get that grant and get those kind of forgivable loans if they keep their employees on staff. Again, we'd see the V. And if people are laid off, they get a generous severance package like WeWork, then of course things could keep rolling. And a shorter period of shelter in place, but not rushing it. And that, of course, is the talk of the town today. Like, when are we going to open things back up? So a shorter period of sheltering in place, but not too soon so as to cause an overload in the healthcare system. What does that look like? And a slowing of new cases. So we have seen this, we have seen a lot of this play out. So there's still a chance, and many people still believe there would be a V recovery, which would be great. If that were the case, you would really want to be buying like crazy over the next few months because there's so much uncertainty and you know, there's opportunity. We're already seeing, if you saw the Atlanta webinar yesterday, for the first time, we're able to get a hold of some new homes that would never be released to investors. They only go to homeowners. So we're getting access to inventory we wouldn't normally get, and at lower prices and low interest rates. And man, if it ends up being a V, you would want to be buying over the next 4 months and ride that bounce back up. So for those, you know, pay attention to these things taking place. And if they do, you would want to really be jumping in sooner than later. The way that this played out in the past was the S&L crisis, where it was pretty quick. And if you jumped in, literally it was just January to October was the down, and then a quick bounce back from October to January, and then through the following year. So there, if you just kind of jumped in right around September, October, you did pretty well. So that, again, 8 to 10 month scenario. Now, some people believe it will be more like a U shape, which means that it won't be a quick bounce back. There'll be a little bit longer time at the bottom, and that would cause more harm to the economy. Means you'd probably get more discounted properties and so forth. But this would be if the disease doesn't get in control. You would throw out the short-term thinking, and things would take a little longer. And that would be if the payments are delayed. It would be if companies and cities take on debt to survive, and mental scars, people just being afraid to go back out. I mean, I just got asked to go speak in Miami in August, and I'm just not sure. I haven't said yes yet. I don't know if I want to fly across the country yet. So, mental scars, changes in behavior, don't know. If things open up, will we be social distancing at restaurants? Will there be big gatherings? We just don't know at this point. State budgets, some of the states are really struggling, right? Because they don't get the kind of bailouts that the federal government can do. They're getting some, but it's not the same. I just heard in Las Vegas, they had to lay off a bunch of police. They just can't afford to keep them on. If there's that city might have a tougher time recovering. So dependent on crowds and travel, right? CapEx slows closer to a stop. Qualification issues for housing holding back the ability to boost wider economy. So we are seeing a bit of that. That's why the Fed is doing everything it can to keep lending flowing, to keep liquidity. Major economies across the globe slow. So, this is not just a US problem, this is global. So if we see other economies slowing as well, that could affect us, and certainly the supply chain. And then small businesses start to fail. So if this goes on too long, businesses won't be able to hold on forever. The Fed can't fund things forever. So that's when we would see businesses going out of business, maybe bankruptcies, maybe foreclosures. This is when things would get worse. Now, again, it's worse depending on who you are. There's a whole lot of real estate investors who are kind of waiting for that moment. Now, I don't want to be shark-like, so I don't even want to talk that way right now, because we have more important things to focus on, which is the health of America. But I can tell you there are a lot of real estate investors kind of waiting for the U, because they want to buy up all the cheaper assets at the bottom and then ride that wave up. So if that were the case, it would be typically a 16-month recession. I mean, at least that's how it was in the past, with an oil crisis being of the 70s being an example of that. So you would have wanted to buy about a year later after things hit bottom. We'll really jump in then. And then an L recession is what we're really not wanting. And an L would basically be a drop and then staying there at the bottom. So this is more depression information, depression news, and some people are talking about it. We just don't know, but here's what these economists thought would create that. The companies, cities, and people take on debt to survive that all needs to be paid back, and it gets harder to pay back. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of what the government is giving out doesn't have to be paid back if you follow the guidelines. So that's interesting. If they can't get access to money, that could be a problem. And then developed and developing economies are just slow across the globe. So kind of like we said, a global recession or depression. So this would be if policy is ineffective at boosting growth and is unsuccessful in incentivizing people to spend. But what's interesting is people are really still spending, it seems like, just in a different way. People are ordering. I mean, certain companies are just taking off, while others are really getting hit hard. Now, when Rich and I went to Singularity University, which is sort of a futurist approach from the Silicon Valley of what's coming with robots and with new technologies over the next 10 years. And a lot of what we're seeing right now was already kind of predicted by them. And I mentioned this on a few podcasts and webinars, but they were already talking about school being at home with technology that allowed kids to really learn at their own pace, that they don't necessarily need to go into schools, and that you wouldn't necessarily need to even go into hospitals because you can get so much service at home and in the future with your own nurse robot. And that more and more people would be ordering online. I mean, that was a trend that was already happening. So it's almost like the future is coming faster. But the L recession, this is, or depression really, an example of this would be Japan, where they had excessive debt, liquidity problems, deflation, which is why the Fed's really fighting that. They don't want that. And demographics, this is a big one, just a larger share of an aging population with not enough younger people, and a bigger, just a longer lasting recession that stopped growth. So it's possible we could end up in an L-shaped, but it's probably unlikely given some of the things that we're looking at today, which is we do have better demographics. We have a lot of young people, brilliant young people. We're the leaders in technology. And, so there is a lot of hope that we will not have the same kind of issues as Japan. What we do have in common with Japan is this excess debt. We're going to really have to figure that out. That is a question nobody knows how to answer at this time. Liquidity, I think because the Fed has the ability to print all this money, it just may not be as big an issue here. We have yet to see. So here are what 3 large organizations think will happen. And again, this was a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to find out in the next update that I give kind of where they're at now. But a couple of weeks ago, it was JP Morgan that came out and said, yeah, Q1's going to be pretty bad, Q2 is going to be worse, but then things are going to bounce back in Q3 and Q4. UBS said kind of the same thing, not so bad in Q1, pretty bad in Q2, little better in Q3, and then starting to boom in Q4. Goldman Sachs had sort of the more dreadful outlook for Q2, negative 24%, but then a quick bounce back in Q3. So Goldman Sachs would have you believe, wow, you better be really jumping in the end of Q2 because there could be a massive bounce back in Q3. And that was kind of the same thing Harry Dent said on the RealWealth show. And then great, big growth in Q4. So we'll have an update next week or the week after on, new numbers, but this is basically what they are saying. Now with Google, when it comes to housing, metros that have seen the largest year-over-year decline in Google searches for homes for sale, look at that, California, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Washington, New York, and metros that have seen the smallest year-over-year decline in Google searches, so they haven't been affected. Again, not surprising. Look at that, mostly the Southwest, Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina. So still lots of Google searches for people trying to buy homes or move to those areas. So in conclusion, and then I'll take some questions, it's my opinion that home building will slow, definitely in the high end. It's already been difficult in the affordable range, but any home builders who are able to build affordable housing should do pretty well, probably very well, but overall, and it's been difficult to do that. So most home builders it will probably slow down because they were already overpriced. The Fed will come in, well, and again, when there's a slowdown in home building, that was the problem already, is we didn't have enough inventory. Now there would be even less. The Fed will come to rescue to prevent foreclosures. We're already seeing that. Banks learned big time. They don't want to go through a foreclosure crisis. So if you're kind of waiting for the 2009 to show up, I don't know that banks are going to handle it that way this time. In fact, they figured it out. Wow, that was really loud. Sorry about that. Banks kind of figured it out by 2012 that, and before that even, that just dumping a bunch of distressed property onto the market is really not good for them. It's not good for the housing market. It's not good for anyone. So they started to just hold the properties or do forbearances or, restructuring the loan. I mean, all kinds of things happen, even just this zombie inventory, just vacant homes, or a lot of the banks just learned how to fix up the homes themselves and sell them, and not as distressed, but as inventory, or rent them out. So I don't think that the banks want to go through what they went through in 2009. So if you're kind of hoping for that, I I think you might be waiting a while. There's going to be a different way that it's dealt with, in my opinion. Uh, Sales of A-class homes will definitely slow because there's just not really the financing for it. And I don't know. It's People are going to have a huge down payment, and will they be doing that? So there could be opportunity in A-class homes if you have the money to buy bigger properties. I had said on some other podcasts, that could be an opportunity if you were looking to do senior housing or assisted living and buying a really big house and renting out the rooms individually to, single moms or seniors or students or whatever. That could be an opportunity in the future because there won't be financing for it, but you'd have to find the money for that because it won't be easily available. Sales of B-class affordable homes, in my opinion, will remain stable because there's just not enough of them. There's not new inventory coming, and there's still great demand, more demand, it seems like, for affordable homes as more and more people kind of change their attitude about how they might be living in the future, which is potentially needing and wanting more space, wanting a yard, not wanting to be around maybe so many other people. And then the sale of C-class homes, could stall because that segment of the population seems to be affected the most by this situation. We know that, unfortunately, that's the case. Many people don't have the luxury of being able to just work at home. If you're in the restaurant business or, travel, you work for the airlines, you can't do that from home. So this sale of C-class homes could stall, but not necessarily the rental of them. So more people might be forced to rent in C-class or in B-class, and probably less demand for A-class rental. And then again, qualifying for loans is going to be more difficult. So again, that could force more people to rent. But most investors had to have good credit scores anyway, so it won't maybe change anything for investors, which means, again, maybe more demand for landlords. And then again, demand for B and C class single family rentals, I believe, will soar as the mindset shifts on where people want to live. And then there could be an opportunity in apartments at some point. We'll be keeping a good eye on it for those that were over leveraged, overpriced, and they just can't make the numbers work, and those properties go into default or go on the market for much, much less. Because again, with apartments, it's based on income. And if income levels go down, so does the value of the property. So there could be some opportunity there. And again, we'll be paying close attention to it over the coming year.